We have a question coming from Twitter, and it's been coming from a lot of people, so the people have given it to me. And I think it's an important question. Now, as you know, Canada's economy is more and more sitting on going towards natural resources. It's a natural resource-based economy we're developing with the oil sands. And the people that are in the front line in this are the First Nations, and they are starting to resist actively, and we've seen this mostly in the past year and a half. So how do you evaluate the impact of this mobilization on Canadian politics and on Canadian society?
How it impacts Canadian politics and society, it's for you to judge. But I think we should describe it a little more slightly different terms. It's true that Canadian policy is more and more oriented towards natural resource extraction in Canada and throughout the world. Canadian mining operations are just destroying large parts of the world. Canada's not alone, but it's one of the leaders. And the accurate term for this is that Canada is trying to take the lead in destroying the possibility of decent survival. That's what it means to exploit tar sands and do gold mining in Colombia and coal mining and so on and so forth. That means try to destroy the world in which your grandchildren might be able to survive. That's the Canadian idea now, not what John Holmes said. And Canada's got a leading role in this. There is resistance. In Canada, it's coming from First Nations. But it's worth remembering that that's a worldwide phenomenon. Throughout the world, the indigenous populations are in the lead in trying to arrest them. Whatever we call them, or they call themselves, are actually taking the lead in trying to protect the earth. That's extremely significant. This is something that goes back hundreds of years. Actually, it goes back to the core of Anglo-American Canadian law 800 years ago, Magna Carta. In 2 years, will be the 800th anniversary. It'll be interesting to see how it's commemorated. Magna Carta had two parts. But one part people sort of know about, what's called the Charter of Liberties. It was, presumption of innocence, the right to jury trial, and so on. It was kind of limited in the 13th century. It's been expanded over the years. And by now it's been almost eviscerated in the last 10 years in all kind of ways. So that's a disaster. But there was another part to the Magna Carta. It was called the Charter of the Forests. And that had to do with protecting the commons from the king, protecting the commons from the depredations of authority. What are the commons? The commons are the forests, the woodlands, the fields, the things that people own in common. And it was the source of their food, their fuel. It was a welfare system. The Robin Hood myths are based on this, protecting the commons, in that case from the sheriff, from authority. And the commons were cultivated, protected, and sustained over the centuries and developed. So they were well developed by people who wanted them for the future, for themselves and for their future generations. And the idea was to save it from attack by authority. Well, you look through the centuries, it's been chipped away. With the rise of capitalism in England, the enclosure movements and others, capitalist corporate and state power, wasn't corporate then, business and state power, landowner power, chipped away at the commons and opened them up for private exploitation. It continues to the present. What Canada and the US and others are doing now is trying to take away what's left of the commons, includes the global environment, privatize it, take it away. Now there is a myth that we're all taught called the tragedy of the commons. It's a modern conception. The myth is that if you leave something under common control and supervision, it's going to be destroyed. The only way to save anything is to put it under private ownership. Okay, you open your eyes and you see it's the opposite. When it's under private ownership, it's going to be destroyed for profit making. If it belongs to the commons, to the people, the commons in general, they'll protect it. Plenty of experience with that. And when First Nations or indigenous populations in Bolivia or the Aboriginals in Australia, Adivasi in India, all over the world, when they're trying to protect a remnant of the commons from private power, predatory private power, it's a struggle that goes back 800 years. It's now reaching the point where the survival of, literally survival, depends on it. So going back to the question, what impact will this have in Canada? That's really for you to decide. It's not a matter for prediction, but for action.